welcome and welcome back to all my butterflies and you emerging butterflies. Oh my goodness, the weather has finally broke here in Vegas and I'm excited, but now I look even more sweatier. But anyway, welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations here on Vegas Hype Media. You know that means today it's Thursday and we are going to get into a very uncomfortable conversation today. First, per usual, I want to go ahead and thank last week's guest, Mr. Maximum, who came in and did some beautiful poetry and shared some of his amazing stories. And we got to learn a lot about him. And hopefully we all learned some things about ourselves as well. So it is still Poetry Month, and that's what we are highlighting and celebrating here on Uncomfortable Conversation. And we talked about poetry it comes from a very vulnerable place, and finding a balance between how we share that vulnerable place without giving up too much of our authentic self. So we're going to continue down that road. And today's guest is, he is currently a mentor, a motivational speaker. He's also the author of Joey Letters from Prison. Michael DiVicino. Oh my goodness, I just sat here and did it like 20 times and I still messed it up. Don't laugh at me, Quan. Michael DiVicino, better known as Mikey D, or if you're a little bit older and you know some things about some Vegas history, better known as Hollywood Mike. Mr. Hollywood Mike, welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations.
Thank you for having me here, Zykia. And the correct pronunciation, even though we went over that for the last 15 minutes.
Listen,
Juan?
This is my show. You don't get to make me uncomfortable.
Oh, I see. All right. It's DiVicino. She slaughtered that pretty good.
DiVicino. See, I said it right. DiVicino.
But you got it.
I got it.
Thank you for having me, Zykia.
No, I appreciate you being here. I'm glad that I get to sit and have this conversation with you, because it's a conversation that a lot of people don't get to have from your perspective or from mine. You know, a lot of people like yourself don't always get to share their side. So first, I would like for you to fill the people in on what your history has been for the last 30 years. Just a little bit of what happened and why you're a special guest today.
Okay. So on August 4th of 2019, I was released from prison after nearly 30 years. I got locked away while in my 20s for allegations having to do with Italian organized crime. And while I was originally sentenced to serve in 1990, I had a release date in 1993. That date came and went. I had somebody that I was close to in that whole Italian, whatever we get into here today, that whole Italian old Vegas and old world background.
We'll say family.
Okay. Unbeknownst to me, while I was waiting for and working toward my release date in 1993, I began getting indicted. It turned out that an individual that I was close to, Italian, of course, that I used to protect, he had been cooperating with the government, unbeknownst to me and many others, on both the East and the West Coast. And he was working a deal to get his own brother off murder charges. And in doing so, he was wearing a wire on me the entire time I was protecting him. And so my 1993 release date got parlayed into nearly 30 years later.
30 years later.
Yes.
30 years later, and here you are now, free.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
And were you a poet before going in? Did you write?
Prior to going in?
Yeah.
Actually, I did not. Now that you mention it, no.
No. So this is something that you found while you were in there. I guess we could say therapeutic. Did it help?
Yeah, absolutely. I cultivated, now that you're bringing me to that, I cultivated many things while I was behind the walls or the electric razor wire.
Yeah. Can we go ahead and get into the poem that you are going to share with us today?
Sure. Are you?
I'm ready.
You're ready for me to
We're
recite
ready.
this?
Yes.
So during the decades that I was away, I wrote books for at-risk youth, parents, school teachers, people everywhere. I also compiled and composed an eclectic collection of poetry, prose, essays. And the one that I brought today, I titled The American Dream.
Everybody wants that.
Right?
Yeah.
So here we go, The American Dream. Step right up, ladies and gentlemen. This is a story of the greatest lie ever told. It's called The American Dream, and contained within this fable is a tale called the Bill of Rights, which is where this bill of goods was first sold. And penned amongst these other, quote, self-evident truths is that all men were created equal. Omitted from this document, however, are the adjectives women, the poor, and the non-homogeneous, for that evidently is to be found in yet another sequel. Freedoms of press, freedoms of speech. From the bully pulpit did the founding fathers preach that all have the natural born right, goes on to proclaim, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Omitted from these pages, however, are the words, the crippled, blind, and lame, the disadvantaged, and the underclass. And these few proffered rights, amongst many others, were said to be guaranteed and protected by the U.S. Constitution, depending first, of course, upon one's socioeconomic background, genetic makeup, and or skin color. However, I have found it not to be a declaration of independence, but a proclamation of collusion. And in this author's opinion, any findings otherwise are merely an optical, if not a psychological illusion. The American Dream.
Thank you for sharing that. How long ago did you write that?
This piece is actually undated. I brought the rough draft, which I dated all my work, Zykia, throughout the years. And what I have written on this one was 9:50 p.m. Saturday night on June 27th. However, for whatever reason,
You didn't write the year.
I didn't date it, and that's very unusual for me. However, I would guess that was written over roughly the past decade or so.
Over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been out now for 3-4 years? Oh,
Just over 3 years.
just over 3 years.
Yes.
Is that piece still relevant to you? Do you feel like it's still relevant?
Regrettably, unfortunately, sadly, yes, it absolutely is still relevant.
Hmm. When you speak about the freedom of press, freedoms of speech from the bully pulpit, what exactly is that in reference to?
So I think that happens to be an actual literal term from back when. I can't say the origins of it. But there's a play on words here with me, with my poem here. The bully pulpit is
Right.
absolutely appropriate. So you have the pulpit, which we take, whether you're a politician, you're in a church, etc.
Right.
In this case, obviously, we're speaking about politics. The bully pulpit. Stay with me. Stay
I'm with
with me.
you.
The bully pulpit. How apropos that is.
Okay. The bully pulpit. So in your writing, do you feel like you are being your most vulnerable when you write? Are you sharing all of your truths, or are you finding a way to just give a little bit to the people?
And now that you even bring that to my mind, Zykia, I've really never contemplated that. Was I in my vulnerable states then or now? I was in my depths, and I've always been very, very deep, contemplative. And I think I went even deeper during the years and decades that I was locked in a cage. This comes from the core of my being. There's no other way to put it. Whether that be vulnerable or otherwise, it's all my truth. It's the way I've seen things since I was young.
So your American dream, do you feel like someone took that from you?
No, I proffered that. I put that on the table, actually.
I appreciate that you took ownership of that.
Absolutely.
How did you take your own American dream? Because, I mean, a lot of us are quick to blame someone else and point the finger.
Yes.
Oh, well, if they wouldn't have did so-and-so, and you clearly stated that someone from the family saved their own blood and threw you basically under the bus. Why are you not saying it's them and it's you?
Because I discovered, amongst many things, while I was locked away, having gone away in my 20s.
I'm sorry, before you answer that,
Okay.
did you figure that out when you first went in? Like, did you feel like that initially when you found out about it?
No, I did not. So by the time I had found out of the deep betrayal, I was definitely, dare I say, a different person. Different in that vengeance, et cetera, et cetera. That was something you didn't want to bring to my doorstep. You didn't want to beckon me on that.
Why didn't we want to beckon you? Because you don't look scary to me. I think I could take you.
You probably could, Zykia. You probably could. I don't know.
You probably want me to take you. Never mind. Yeah.
All right, so listen, that's another conversation. But so I used to play the blame game. I've written some pieces about that as well. And I think maybe a lot of us, if we're willing to be truthful at some point in our lives, perhaps we've blamed others for the choices that we've made. And there may or may not be truth in that. But what I did discover while I was growing up in there, if you will, is playing the blame game or blaming anybody else for choices that we make as adults. It doesn't jive. It don't fit. At some point, we got to take ownership of the decisions we make, even if the examples that were set before us may have been poor. That being said, playing the blame game never allows any of us to move forward. You're never going to pass go. You're never going to collect 200 playing the blame game. And it's never going to allow us to grow, most importantly.
So your time in prison, do you feel like it was well spent?
Absolutely. Yes, it was. I can absolutely take full ownership of that as well.
Okay. We're here right here now in this day. Do you think you would do it all over again?
I don't understand.
Knowing what you know now, how would your time be different? Or would you make some choices so that you didn't have to do time?
I see. I got to circle back real quickly because it ties back into this question. So Frankie, the individual that ended up wearing the wire on me, that betrayed me, a man that I actually had love for, that I cared about. For me, to this present day, went away in my 20s, got out at nearly the age of 60. When I love hard. Loyalty, all about that. And yet, you as you grow up and you move through life, you end up realizing you have to be very careful who you choose to be loyal to and who you choose to follow. So in my youth, I was following the example that was all around me. Mm-hmm. And like so many youth today and over the decades, we often mirror what we see in our own homes, in our communities. And we have to be very careful what we're modeling for young people.
Absolutely.
Because they're paying attention whether you think they are or not.
Always they are.
So there I was following suit, and I was going to be the best that I could. And because of all my anger, confusion at that young age, I was the guy you wanted to pull into whatever alleys that you thought to go ahead and have your
and
back.
Handle that.
Yes.
So, but you've done your time. You know, there was some form of rehabilitation for you.
Yes.
Right? If you were placed back in that time before you got arrested, knowing what you know now.
I see.
What would your choices be? Or what would you do?
Yeah, I definitely would have been at a different bus stop, if you will, than the one headed to prison for life. Damn, that's a deep question. I I'd have done everything different, Zykia.
Everything.
And you know, it's ironic because also my truth completely happens to be I was exactly where I needed to be. And the powers to be, whoever we believe in, whoever we call God as individuals, the powers to be, of course, knew that's exactly where I needed to be. And I was very wonderfully used while I was in there by the universe.
Right. And you're out now. You were away for 30 years, 3 decades. A lot has changed.
Absolutely.
How is that for you managing coming out of there to this space? Like you walk in this room with all of this technology, microphones and, you know, cameras and lights, action, and it's all pointed at you right now. How is that for you?
I got to tell you, it's very surreal. In one word, it's surreal. I have been out for 3 years now, so as I'm told by loved ones, and I feel it a little slower, but I'm acclimating more and more. But I would say for the first 2 years in particular, because I've been documenting my whole journey,
right,
with the intent of putting that out there
doing something with it.
Absolutely, to educate others with it. I don't know if I was, I don't know who the kids see today. I'm really not big with television, etc. Life's happening everywhere.
Yeah, it's happening. And a lot has happened since
radically.
You went away.
Radically different world, revolutionized by technology.
Were cell phones out?
No, they weren't. Pagers. We had pagers.
You had a beeper?
I certainly probably had a couple of them. But
So wait, you weren't even, what year did you go away?
1990 for the last time.
They had cell phones in 1990.
Did not.
Yeah, they did those big block ones.
We had box phones. Those were shoebox phones.
Yeah, you had one of those?
Like I said, probably had a couple of them. But that being said, Zykia,
you couldn't send a text message on that thing.
You certainly were not. Yeah, but the world was radically changed during the decades I was away. And if you were to ask me what was the most radical to you since being out,
right?
Not only has the world been revolutionized by technology, people's attitudes overall are extremely different than before I went away.
I would agree with that. Totally would agree with that. So with that being said, let's go to the first year that you were out.
Okay.
Being out, coming out, did you feel like at any point in time, maybe you were just safer where you were?
Yes, I could say there a little element of that, but also my struggles were great because I made that home in there. I was sentenced to die in prison. I was sentenced to life without.
How do you get comfortable with knowing that you could never, there's a real possibility of not seeing the outside world again, and that this very well could be where you're going to take your last breath? How do you normalize that and become comfortable with that uncomfortable situation?
I think a lot of people have to do that, regrettably, in many facets of life. But for me personally, I was going to make the absolute most of it. I had my first and only son and child conceived while I was in prison on what was called a conjugal visit.
Look at you. Shout out to conjugals.
And
did you? No, you didn't use a prophylactic.
What's that? So anyways, but at that time I was supposed to be getting out within just like 24 months. So all kidding aside. And then it got
extended.
But then it turned into a couple years later, to, as I've alluded to, nearly 3 decades later, and I never made it home to him. But that being said, self-preservation, Darwinism at its finest, okay? Hopefully we all learn to make the best of our not so fortunate situations. We learn to rise above, and that's what I was fortunate enough to do.
So you said you had a son.
Yes.
30 years. He was conceived while you were in there. So
that's correct.
He was damn near 30.
That's exactly right.
The first time that you got to have like a real walk with your son.
Yes, I've documented every bit of that.
Can you just share with us the first time, like coming out hugging your son as a free man?
Oh, it's on tape. I got to tell you, when I review, there was a camera crew there waiting for me the day I got out.
Uh-huh.
And when I review that, which is often, I choke up every time I see it, because here's now a young man, a man who was conceived, not proud of that. While I was behind the wall, he was conceived. And as you just said, I stepped out to a grown man waiting for me. And that's who I named the first book after, by the way, which
Joey.
Yeah, dear Joe. Yeah, Joey or Giuseppe. And
he was almost the age that you were when you went in, not too far.
Couple years off now that you mention it. And I keep going back to one word. It was surreal. And there's been times a little earlier on that I almost wanted to run right back in, but I'm not cut that way. I got to fight through it, as we're all called to do. And
how do you think, what if he would have made it in before you made it out?
Ooh, that would have been devastating, to say a minimum, because I came to call a lot of those, and I get where to speak about my biological son, but so many behind the wall of every race, creed, and color used to call me either pops, unks, etc. And they all got a piece of my heart, but to see my
Your
flesh
son.
and blood come in there, I've never even contemplated that till you just said it, Zykia. That'd have been extremely tough for me.
Yeah. So I think about how many men of many different races and colors, like you just brought up, who go in and then their child follows.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
That's a very real thing in the
Yes.
world that we live in this American dream
Yes.
that you talked about. So, I mean, you doing a full 30 years to see your son mimic that would have been
Devastating.
Yeah. So what is your son doing, if you can share? Like, where is
Sure.
he? I mean, being raised without a dad is, it's never easy.
Right.
Especially when you actually have one, know you have one, but he can't physically be there.
Yes. So he's gotten into plumbing. He's back east. He and I speak about it quite regularly, him getting involved with a platform that I've been building to educate and divert today's youth from going from the school to prison pipeline.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because we have a little bit of time left.
Okay.
What do you think you have to offer as you're 60 plus years old and you're out here talking to teenagers? How are you trying to be impactful? How do you relate?
Number one, I'm not 60 plus, so check yourself. I'm 60, so take it easy. Take a little something
Wait,
off
when did you
that.
turn 60?
Take something off
When did you
that.
turn 60?
July.
Okay, so there's a plus.
All
Because
right,
you're closer to
stand
61.
corrected. I stand
Don't
corrected.
do me.
All right,
Come on
I-
now.
I stand corrected. Wow, so what do I have to offer today's youth? Me having started to get locked up, I saw the inside of my very first lockup facility at the age of 12. I cycled in and out of the various systems throughout my young and obviously my older life. So,
But you're older now. So what do you say to children when they're like, "Man, you don't know what I'm going through. Like, you a grandpa."
Yeah.
How do you meet them where they're at?
The lingo might be a little different from then to now for whatever culture we each came from. The fact of the matter is, just as with myself and today's youth, me when I was their age, I wasn't hearing anything unless somebody may have walked that walk. I'm that person that walked it, maybe times a little bit. I walked it so I could relate to a whole lot of what these kids are going through today, and time doesn't erase that. It's trauma knows no ethnicity, no skin color, no gender.
Right.
Trauma is
it
trauma.
doesn't have a boundary on it.
It does not.
Speaking of trauma, in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in therapy? Do you think you need it? Are you in it first? I'm sorry. I'm good for asking multiple questions.
No, am I in it? I am not. But I'm somebody who's pretty good today about just letting things pass through, not carrying today's BS into tomorrow, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I'm not into therapy. What were you asking me about trauma?
I said, do you think you need therapy? Do you think it would be beneficial for you?
I think it'd probably be beneficial for each of us.
Don't blame us. We talking about you.
Okay. All right. Probably would be, but it's just, I think, been a matter of time for me. The longer I'm out, the better I've gotten, and I certainly work very hard toward that. The recidivism rate is extremely high for anybody that, I don't know the exact numbers. You go away for, say, 5+ years, recidivism rate is ridiculous. And
Yes,
the longer you're away, and that's by design, in my opinion, the longer you're away, the higher the recidivism rate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm that guy that likes to break the mold, so on many levels.
That's what you're doing.
And yes, I am. All powers to be, thank you, and yes.
Yeah. Have you lost anyone while you were in there that was very near and dear?
Yeah, of course, numerous.
Yeah. How did you handle that in there?
How did I handle that? Like most things, I internalized a whole lot during those years, of course. In there, you really can't move through a war zone while you're wiping your tears. It just, one don't go with the other.
Right.
So I internalized a whole lot. I didn't have the ability today about just letting things pass through, like river, setting things down on a river and letting the current take it.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
My last question is a really personal question.
Okay.
28 years, 30 years. Were you married and had conjugal visits the entire time that you were in there?
No, for a very short period of time. Like I said, initially I was sentenced to 6 years. California is where I got pinched at. That's where I was arrested. You do half time, so I was scheduled for that 3-year kick out. Mm-hmm. During that time, the woman I was dating, I had a tanning salon back in the day.
So you married? And you guys were together for the 6 years?
Yeah, that's correct.
So she did a 6-year bid with you?
The 3 years. The 3 years, yeah.
So for 3 years, you were able to have conjugal visits?
We had a few during that time. Mm-hmm.
What did you do for those other 25 years?
What did I do?
Yeah. I mean, because men, women, people go into prison, right? And they serve these long sentences and you know what happens behind the door happens behind the door, but then you come out into the world and you are the person that the rest of the world saw you as going in.
Okay.
So for you, if you don't mind sharing,
absolutely. No.
What was that like for you after being able to have conjugal visits to now you're on this stint where you can't have conjugal visits with the woman?
Got it. For me personally, I took care of myself, right? I mean, there's nothing.
I don't know what you mean when you say you took care of yourself.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
would you like me to be graphic here?
I would like for you to explain it so that the viewers know exactly what you're talking about. This is an uncomfortable conversation. Get with me.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure how graphic you'd like.
I don't want you to be graphic, but when you say taking care of yourself, because if I say I took care of him, I mean, that could be a number of different things. I could knock him off or, like.
Okay.
So
there was a lot of homosexuality that goes on behind the prison walls. I don't know the percentage. I would say is.
No need for numbers. I just want to know how you took care of yourself.
I pulled my pants down. I put a sheet up, and I handled my business
with your hand.
Yeah, Rosie Palm and the Five Sisters, as we used to say.
That's all I wanted to know.
Sometimes
Mikey.
you use the sock, a little Vaseline, plastic.
What does the sock do?
It was the friction. Yeah, you do. You get right in it, don't you? It was a different texture.
So do you put the Vaseline on the sock?
Sure. Whatever makes you happy. You get very creative in there.
I don't know. I don't have an Audi. I have an innie, so
Oh,
I don't know
that's
how
right.
that works. I'm not sticking a sock
All
anywhere.
right. Well, look, watch this. You get very creative when you're locked in a cage by yourself for decades.
Right.
Even if you're there a short time, creativity kicks in.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, the other thing wasn't an option. It wasn't of interest to me.
You never thought about it. You didn't look at
did
them.
not.
Even when they had long hair.
I got to be.
They had bundles in prison.
Hey, hold up a minute. Hey, wait. Hey, what do you got going on there? No, that wasn't my thing.
All right. Well, I do appreciate you, Mikey D. You know, I have lots of love for you. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story and your American dream. Thank you, butterflies, emerging butterflies. Please like, share, subscribe. You watched me on Vegas Hype Media live. Go follow me at UC Salaam. Thank you.